right, everybody's back. Are we ready to get started?
Yes, we are.
Okay. Go ahead, Mr. Owens.
The municipality calls John Jerry Wedlick.
Okay. And Madam Clerk, are we back on the record?
Yes, Ms. Dombrowski.
Okay, thank you. Sir, could you please say your first and last name and then spell your last name for the record?
My name is John Wedlick, Wedlich.
And just if you'll look at the clerk, she'll go ahead and swear you in.
If you could please raise your right hand. Do you solemnly and sincerely swear or affirm that the answers you will give to the questions asked of you in these proceedings will be true?
Yes.
Great.
Okay, thank you very much. Mr. Wedlick, could you tell us where you're employed?
I work for the municipality of Anchorage. I'm the chief appraiser in property appraisal.
And how long have you been with the municipality in the appraisal department?
I started in 1995, so almost 20 years.
And is there a type of property that you are most experienced with in terms of residential, commercial, warehouse, or otherwise? Or
I'm primarily work mostly with residential due to the large size of the component of our tax base.
could you walk us through briefly the assessment process? How does the municipality learn about property? How do you determine a value for property once it's on the list?
Yes. Basically what we do is as a property is platted or brought online, we go out and we do a thorough review of that piece of real estate and identify the various features that it has that might affect value, such as, view, topography, whether there's a road to the property or water and sewer, well and septic, what attributes that property might have. Then if it's an improved property, we pick up the improvements components of it. Once we've described the real estate correctly, we take the sales comparables that we find in the marketplace and we develop a valuation system from similar sales of property that are similar to the subject and develop assessments for those.
And where do you, first off, in terms of evaluating some of the attributes that you mentioned, topography, view, and other features, do you get descriptions of those features from written descriptions of the property? How do you evaluate that?
Basically, we can get it from physical inspection by going to the property and determine it. We also look at maps like contour maps and things like that. We also study maps where there might be indications where water and sewer or a paved road has been brought before a property and update our records.
I see. And in terms of market value, where do you get your sources of information on what's going on in the market?
Basically, Alaska is a non-disclosure state, so it's always kind of a battle to assure that we have all the sales data that is out there. But we send out to the buyer and seller of each transaction a letter asking them if they would share with us the sales price. We also will get it during periods where someone will come in and say they believe that their assessment is incorrect, and they'll ask us if we could look at some other sales data that they found to determine if that would have an effect on their value. And sometimes we pick up assessments that way. We also will work with the real estate industry where we can, where they'll allow us to do that, but there are some limitations with them providing that information, but sometimes we pick up information there. And then during the appeal period, sometimes we will receive appraisals on the subject property, and we'll find sales information in that as we determine the market.
And do changes that occur over time in properties, do those get factored in as well? Do you monitor changes, physical changes to the property, for example?
Yes, there's about 100,000 properties in the city, and we have approximately 20 residential or 15 residential appraisers that we send out. And as we find out about differences of the property, say through permits or their observations in the field when they're on other assignments, we pick up those features and update our record. We are required by the state of Alaska that every 6 years we must have inspected every piece of real estate at least once. So we have a cycle that we run, and we pick up property inspections through that 6-year cycle. But we can also go to a property if we have known that there is some additional features that are being done at that property. Then we'll go back and look instead of waiting the full 6 years.
So do you automatically get notified if there's a building permit to construct something on a parcel?
We have access to the Hansen system at the city, and it will import in some of the permits. And from that, we pick up the types of new construction, demos on properties and things like that, and it'll help direct us to the property. We've had some difficulties that sometimes there isn't a permit that has been put in place because someone just did it without going through the permitting process, and we'll find real estate like that. But primarily, that's one of our major sources of that.
Do you have any kind of general notion of how quickly information is received and evaluated in your office compared to when changes occur in property?
We basically, we realize that in property appraisal that we don't always get all of the information that's out there. And sometimes it's up to us to try to hunt that down and find it. So there are loopholes that in the structure of working with other departments. I've even had department members from other areas say, I don't want to pay taxes, so I'm not going to tell you anything, not understanding the full ramifications that by not sharing that information, we might not have an equitable value on all real estate. So we do have some difficulties. So sometimes there is a lag period that can occur when things are occurring, and as soon as we see that, we, because we're required to be at 100% of market value, we will immediately change the value. So sometimes our value changes can be because of the market changes and things that we're seeing from sales, and they can also be that we've observed an area where we didn't have enough data in the past to prove that there was some market change, but then it's becoming very apparent from market data that we've got, and so we might have to change the value in that area outside of just the typical trend.
You have next to you a binder that is an exhibit binder. I'd like you to turn to exhibit G6. Mr. Wedlick, you're aware, aren't you, that the purpose of this hearing today is to address changes and improvements that were made in West Anchorage in the vicinity of Linnery Park?
Yes, I am.
And I've put onto the screen the photograph from 2006. This is exhibit aerial photograph of the Martian subject area from 2006. And so it's exhibit A11. This is the area of interest is along, this is Iliamna Drive, and north of that, in this Marston, West Marston Drive and Foraker Avenue. This was the improvement district in question. You're familiar that that's a purpose for this hearing.
Yes, I am.
And the later photograph that was taken showing the improvements as constructed, you can see that the road has been put in and there's a pump station down here.
That's correct. There is.
And the area in question is generally including Simonson Estates subdivision, Turnagain Heights, and a couple little other segments as well. You're aware of that?
Yes, I am.
And Exhibit G6 that I referred you to is entitled on the top of the page a document called Research Request. Have you had an opportunity to look this document over?
Yes, I have.
Did I provide you a copy to look at?
Yes, sir, you did.
And are you familiar with this document, how it came to be, or any of that?
I'm not. It does appear to be a listing of properties within this area, identifying assessments over the course from 2014 to 2007.
Is this a document that was likely generated by your office?
It could have been.
And have you evaluated the information on this to determine if it's accurate?
Yes, I did, and I found some errors. So it appears that there might have been some changes to assessments or some typos on the document.
How significant or how many errors did you note?
I found probably, it looks like about 5 errors.
Could you point them out for us?
Yes. On page 2 of 4, on parcel 001-19325, Simon Estates, Lot 5, Block 6, the assessments indicated at $228,600. However, that property was appraised at $241,600 for a total assessment of the same because there was no construction on it. Then at the bottom, 001-19502, Lot 2 Pete's, its assessment was $127,200, also total value for the lot. And then on page 3 of 4, the property listed at listed as 001-19313, Turnagain Heights, Lot 13A, Block K, appears to have been appealed, and it started at 62.7, and it was resolved at 41,800.
Is that for what year?
Pardon? That would be 2009.
2009?
Yes.
Instead of 62.7, it should be?
$41,800.
Okay. Any others?
On page 4 of 4, the parcel 001-19305, Lot 14AK Park, it appears to be a typo of 190,900, and it was just 190,000. The total value did appear to be okay, though, so it
So
might.
you're looking at the 2007 value for the lot?
Yes, that's correct. It was 190,000, so $900 difference. And then the final section of it is 001-19340. In 2008, the assessment was listed as 001-19340.
Turnagain Heights, Block K, Lot 8A?
Yes. That property was assessed for $82,300 for the land, for a total value of the same in
In
2000.
2008?
Yes. $82,300.
Any other changes?
No, from what I could see, everything else looked okay.
Now, in this case, you could see that there were subdivision improvements installed through a special assessment district, special improvement districts. So road, water, and sewer were installed. The work began in 2008. The project was concluded in 2010. Did the information about these properties reflect those changes? And if so, point that out to us.
Yes, the work was substantially complete in 2009, and so our 2009 assessment did not show that those features of water and sewer and paving were at the sites yet. And then in 2010, January 1st, 2010, was the first time we picked up that the properties were beginning, that the road was in place now, and that they had that attributes in the water and sewer.
So picking a random example, let's say lot number 001-19320 on, I'm looking at page 3. That's Turnagain Heights, Block K, Lot 5A. You see where I'm looking?
Yes. The property in 2009 was assessed at $59,000 as a paper plat, and in 2010 it was assessed at $233,300 as a lot that has paved road and water and sewer to it.
And were there any other market conditions going on at the time that would account for that change in value?
That specifically appears to be mostly related to the improvements to the lots to make them accessible.
And in looking at the other lots that were in the districts, even down in Simonson Estates, there doesn't seem to be quite as dramatic a change. Say, for example, Simon Estates Block B, Lot 6, which is 001-19421, jumped from 36,600 to 80,200. Again, you think that reflects a change due to the improvement districts?
I don't. Is that up from the inlet? Those lots? There's a variation in that the properties that are down towards the inlet are in a different zoning, and so the ones that are on the upper hillside of the street of Marston are in a R2A zoning, so they have a different zoning. So the differences between those types of zonings could have had that difference of effect between the two that we just discussed.
I see. But it at least doubled and nearly tripled, even for those lots.
Yes, that's correct.
Do the property owners have an opportunity to participate in the process of valuing their properties?
Yes, they always do. We encourage that if anyone has an issue with their property, at any time they can contact us through the year. However, if it's outside of the appeal period, the effects that those conversations would affect the next year's value. If they contact us prior to the end of the open enrollment of appeals for that 30 days that they can discuss it, we will discuss it with them. And if we find that there's a valuation change, we will make it. And then if they appeal the property, of course, then there's a formal appeal that we work with them to resolve issues. So we're pretty open to always finding out if there's something that the public believes that we've incorrectly valued the real estate.
Okay. And did any of the property owners in the Marston Fork or improvement districts appeal their increased assessments?
Yes, a few times over the course of the documents I had written down indications of changes to the properties where there were appeals. So 2014, there were 3 appeals starting at 001-19322, Lot 8, Block C, Simon's Estate. It was appealed, and then after discussion with our staff, it was withdrawn at full value. It was withdrawn at full value.
So the appeal was
signed off
withdrawn.
that it would accept that. It did not change. And then 001-19324 and 25, Lot 6 and Lot 7, Block C, Simon Estates, were both brought before the Board of Equalization, and at those hearings, they were also upheld.
So the values did not change?
The value did not change. Then in 2013, there were no appeals or corrections on the properties. In 2012, there were 2 appeals. The top 2 properties, 001-19303 and 04, both were appealed, and they were also upheld at the Board of Equalization at full value. In 2011, I didn't find any appeals or corrections to the assessments. In 2010, that was the period of time that we were discovering that the roads were in, and so we did a corrected assessment on 29 of the properties. So most of the properties throughout this list were corrected assessments to the eventual assessment that you're seeing here. Then in 2009, there was 1 appeal and there was 5 corrections. The 1 appeal was that property that we discussed earlier, that 001-19313, Lot 13A, Block K, Turnagain Heights. It's listed there at $62,700, but during the appeal process, it was settled at $41,800. And then lots, if we go to 001-19317, 18, 19, and 20, and 21, those were corrected assessments either by discussion with the property owner or corrections that we made to those assessments that are listed here. 2009. So we were probably bringing them in equity with others if there was some variation in our data. In 2008, I found no appeals or corrections. And in 2007, I wasn't able to research that data because over time, the data falls off of our system. So it would take a little more time to go back and find out what was happening in 2007.
Okay, thank you. Did I provide you with copies of sale documents received from some of the property owners in this case?
Yes, sir, you did.
Directing your attention to tab K in the exhibits. Could you take a look at tab 2, K2? And you can see that there's an affidavit of Mr. Spinelli at the front of this indicating he's providing records pertaining to lots 2 of Pete's subdivision and lot 1 of Pete's subdivision.
Yes.
And if you turn to page 10 of 21 of this exhibit, items number 3 and 4 on these escrow instructions, does that identify who would be the responsible party for paying any assessments against these lots after the sale?
Yes, these are indicating that the buyer is assuming the assessments.
Did you observe any other buyers of the properties that were sold and we obtained information about that assumed the responsibility for the assessments in the records that I provided to you?
Yes, we had one sale that we were aware of that was also a similar sale, but it was one of the ones that is closer to the bluff, sold for $200,000, and they also assumed the assessments.
Is that K5?
I believe that is.
Specifically on page 5 of 14, there's the purchase price.
Yes, that's the property that I'm talking about.
And the sale price is $200,000.
Yes.
And if you refer to paragraph 6 on the next page, it says taxes will be prorated as of the date of closing. Assessments for any and all subdivision improvements, LID, RID, WID, will be paid by the buyer.
Yes, that is correct.
And did you calculate what the proposed assessments were for this property? The assessments that are under consideration the rolls that are now out for comment?
Yes, we did.
And what was the total of the RID, WID, and LID proposed assessments on this property?
It was approximately $177,000 plus.
And so the actual sale price of this property as of the date of sale in December 27 of 2012 is what would you conclude?
The transaction was approximately $377,000 plus.
And in 2009, this is Lot 7, Block C, Simonson Estates. We are looking at still at K5. The earnest money agreement on page 5 contains a legal description which refers to Lot 7, Block C, Simonson Estates subdivision. And Lot 7, Block C is identified as property ID number 001-19323.
That is correct.
And the assessed value as of 2009 was $59,100.
The assessed value in 2009 was $59,100.
Do you have any other information that would suggest a justification for a change to 357,000?
No, it's specifically related to the the improvements have been made. So now the property is moved from what we call a paper plat to a property that has access and the utilities, water and sewer.
That's all the questions I have. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Mr. Wedlick. My name is Mike Staley. You and I have never spoken before, as far as I know.
No, sir.
Okay. So I understand that by state law, you're supposed to assess properties at their fair market value at the start of each year. Is that correct?
That's correct.
So you're not supposed to discount them or anything else. You're supposed to look at them and say, what is the fair market value based upon the information I have, correct?
That is correct.
And we all know, though, that the assessments are not always necessarily equivalent with the sale of property. That is, for whatever reason, a buyer and seller have a disagreement about what a property is worth versus what your office might think it's worth, correct?
In sales of property, people have different motivations. There's timing issues that they might have. There's duress on either side. So a sales price itself does not necessarily represent total market value. We look at a larger segment of data, and then from that, because we're assessing in a mass appraisal environment, we also review statistics of our valuation model as to how well it's valuing. And from that determination, we turn that into the state as to our assessments relative to the market.
Okay, so with regard to any particular sale, I might really want this piece of property for some reason. You know, maybe it's next to my mother, maybe it's what I always wanted, and I might be willing to pay more than what somebody else is, and so what I might pay for it might not be the same as what you would ascertain as fair market value.
That's true. You could pay much more.
Okay. And so, but what you do is you try and take a look at all this information and over time do the best you can to try and ascertain what the fair market value of property is, correct?
That's right.
And, you indicated that you look at a number of different factors, whether or not, property has access is one of the factors, correct?
That's true, yes.
Whether or not it has water, sewer, those are both factors. I mean, water's a factor, sewer's a factor. Those are two different factors, really. It might have sewer and not water for some reason.
That's true.
Size of the lot, that's a factor, right?
Yes.
View, that's a factor, isn't it?
Yes.
General location, Anchorage versus the valley, downtown Anchorage versus, East Anchorage or the hillside. All of those might be factors, correct?
That is correct.
And so you take a look at all of that and you do the best job you can to kind of try and come up with the fair market value based upon all of that information, not just for a particular lot, but the lots in the neighborhood over a period of time, correct?
Yes. We try to assure that our assessments are equitable for similar properties throughout the city.
The curious thing that when Mr. Owens was asking you questions, just sort of a bothersome thing to me. He had you take a look at that sale of that one piece of property, K5, Exhibit K5. It was Lot 7, Block C of Simonson Estates. And he had you say, well, they promised to pay $200,000 plus the assessments. If the assessments are the full value, that's $177. That's $377. Do you remember that?
Yes.
And then he had you look at it in 2009, and it was only worth $59,000, right?
Well, that was prior to those being at the property.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
That was prior to the improvements, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, so if you really wanted to say, well, gosh, why would somebody pay that much? You'd want to look at what you assessed it for after the improvements, right? They're taking it subject to the assessments, meaning they're assuming the value of those improvements, right? That 377?
Yes,
Yeah.
that's correct.
So you'd want to take a look at what you did with it with regard to its value after the assessments. So if we take a look at 2010 for that property, we can see that you had it at 234,000, not 59,000, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And again, somebody for whatever reason might have thought it was worth more than that, but this is your best estimate of what these lots have in terms of a fair market value, correct?
With the caveat that within this particular area, there were another grouping of sales that we did not have in our preview to analyze to determine market value. And I think that it might be relevant that on the sale that we discussed, they also were given the right to a portion of the property behind them. So there was that actually additionally affected the value of that property because at one time they might be able to get it to where that parcel is now a bluff lot.
Okay, and so what you're saying is that this sale, where someone paid more than what you thought it was worth, might have some potential future value because of some contingency that this person might be able to realize.
That's correct. So the additional land behind it, they also picked up their rights with that and an assessment on it as well.
Okay.
They're prorated.
So they were actually buying more than what you were assessing.
They
bought what you assessed plus the rights for something more.
with an interest in a larger tract behind them, yes.
Okay. All right. So let's just make sure that that's clear. First of all, we're talking about a piece of property that's on the water. Is that correct? I'm going to put A14 on the overhead. And help me out here. With Block C, Lot 7, is that this one right here?
Cannot read anything on it, but it's one of the lots that are towards the water.
Okay, and I'll represent you, sir. I can read this. It says, and you have that in your folder, A14, if you want to take a closer look. So we were talking about Block C, Lot 7. That's this one here, correct?
That's correct.
So that sale for 377 bought what you appraised, which is outlined in orange there, Block C, Lot 7, correct?
That's correct.
Plus an interest in this large tract behind.
That's correct.
Okay. So it's not really apples to apples there in terms of looking at your appraisal versus that purchase price.
Right. Well, you would have to take the two of them to add it together to determine what our assessment was for the actual transaction that occurred because they had rights in that additional property.
And again, if you want to take a look at this photo in your exhibit pile, because I know it won't show up well, it's A12. And I want to draw your attention to Block B, Lot 11. Do you see that?
Yes, I do.
Okay. And then Block B, Lot 10. Do you see that?
Yes.
And Lot 9 and Lot 8. Okay?
That's correct. Yeah, okay. I
And you
see.
realize that in this photo, this is before any improvements, correct?
Yes.
And I'm going to show you what's been marked as Exhibit 13. And the first one is page 4 of 7. And this is that Block B, Lot 8. And you might be able to see this one on the overhead, just to save you some effort.
Okay.
And you can see that I have assessed values for 2004, 5, and 6 for that lot. You see, can you read that?
Yes, I can.
And so you can see that it was 14,800, 14,800, and then it jumped up to 26,300. Just new data or new information or property values going up or...
Yes. During that period, we were experiencing increases in value. And it appears here, I'd have to look at more data to determine the difference as to why 2006 made it.
Okay. But 2006 predated these improvements, so that jump didn't really have anything to do with these improvements because they didn't happen until 2010, right?
That's true.
Okay. So for that lot, Block B, Lot 8, it went 14, 14, 26. I'm now going to show you the lot next door, which was Lot 9. That went 14, 8, 14, 8, and jumped up to 48, 2. And I'll represent to you, sir, that lot actually has sewer, because the sewer, existing trunk line at that time, ran between lots 9 and 10 over to Sandstrom. And so it did have access to sewer. Presumably, the assessor's office became aware of that, and that's why it's assessed more than the lot next door to it, correct?
Yes.
Then I'm going to show you the next lot, Lot 10. And you can see it's assessed not just for land, but this also has a building. And so the land is 74.9 in 2004, jumps up to 82.5 in 2005, and then that's 87.6 in 2006. The building value is jumping up initially and then jumping back down a little bit.
Yes.
And is that just sort of an adjustment in your office when you say that the building goes from 313 to 352 and then back down to 332?
It can be variations of sales data through those different times. There's a 12-month period, so some of our adjustments might have changed, and it can reflect a little bit of that.
Okay. And then the lot next door to it, Lot 11, it similarly has a value. I think they're nearly identical to $100 or so in terms of land value, 74.4, 82.2, and 87.3. So similar to the lot next door in terms of land value. And then, of course, the home value would vary depending on the quality of the home, the size of the home, a variety of things, correct?
That's true.
So generally speaking, if we're looking at land that's one lot next door to another lot in the same area, with the same road, water, and sewer, approximately the same size, generally the land should be approximately the same value. If there's an improvement on it, the improvement itself might differ significantly.
That's true.
And again, the two improved lots were, this one here is lot, this one here is lot 11, and this one here is lot 10, both of which had homes on them.
Yes.
And so from your perspective or your office's perspective during those years, those two lots had a very similar value, correct?
In the land value, yes,
And
both.
considerably more value than the lots further inland that didn't have access.
Yes, because they had access and they were able to build those homes. They gave them an access to the property.
So going back to Exhibit G6, which is this assessed value from 2007 forward, again, want to just focus for a little bit of time here on Simon Estates Block B, lots 10 and 11. And so I'd like to start with 2007.
Okay?
And you can see that lot 11 in 2007 had a land value of 115, building value of 263. Lot 10 had less of a land value, but more of a building value, correct?
Yes.
Then in 2008, everything jumps up a little. Well, the land values jump up. Actually, the building value for lot 11 goes down, correct?
Yes.
2008, if we look at 2008, I think the land value, or I'm sorry, 2009 I'm looking at now, next page. The land value for both of them, I think, remains the same. Building values, are adjusted somewhat. Then 2010, the land value for lot 11 goes down. Any reason why that you know of?
Offhand, I can't speculate as to what that adjustment might have been.
Okay, that's post improvements, correct?
Yes, January 1st, 2010 was post-improvement.
And I'm going to put A14 up here, and you can see that, indeed, block 11, when we saw that previous photo, it kind of just had a drive at the end of the road at lot 11, and lot 10 as well. Both had just sort of a drive at the end of the road. Now they both have full, complete road access, correct?
Yes.
Is there any reason other than perhaps, I mean, you looked, and I'm assuming that wasn't as a result of a challenge or an appeal, or could they have contacted your office, got an adjustment, and it wouldn't show up in the records?
I'm sorry, would they have contacted and got an adjustment and wouldn't show up in our records?
Let me ask you this. You previously indicated that somebody can contact your office and that as a result of that, you may make a voluntary adjustment. If they contact you within 30 days of that notice, you might make the adjustment that year. If they contact you outside of that 30 days, it might make the adjustment the following year, correct?
That's true.
And so if someone were to contact your office, let's say in 2009, and say, hey, I think my property really isn't worth as much as you say it is, and you agree, it might show up at a lower value in 2010, correct?
Yes, could.
And would there be any record of that then?
The record of that change?
Yeah.
Yes, there would in our office.
Okay, so
If that did happen.
if that happened, then you should have been able to see that.
Yes.
And you looked for changes like that and you didn't see anything.
Yes, I did not see that a change occurred because of that type of information. So it probably had something to do with the valuation model.
Say that again?
It probably had something to do with the valuation model. I'd have to research that and determine what that difference was and how it occurred. So I'd be speculating now to say exactly on that particular property what changed.
Okay. And it's just curious to me because it dropped in value from 121 to 105 between 2009 and 2010 when these improvements got done.
Right.
So nothing comes to mind anyway.
Well, if we move forward to 2011, it appears that maybe there might have been some kind of a mistake because it immediately pulls right back up into the 120, 123 range almost.
Okay. Now, let me ask you another question, Mr. Wedlock. Generally speaking, unless we're in a downturn, I mean, generally speaking, property values are appreciating over time, correct? I mean, we saw that looking back all the way back to 2004, how generally speaking, these assessments tend to go up over time.
In Alaska, I would not like to say that. I think that we have a cyclical market depending on the economy. So it can go either way.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay. But let me ask you this. Assessments can change in value not because of any changes to the character of the land or the improvements, but because of a change in market forces, correct?
That is true.
Okay. So, again, I want to focus now on Exhibit G6. And in particular, I want to look at these lots between 2009 and 2010. And so, and I've kept the map up here, which is A14, because generally, if I look at this, what I'm seeing is that what your office has discovered is that between 2009, before these improvements were done, the lots generally were valued from a low, some of them, and on the waterfront lots, it really looks like a low of about 50-some thousand, correct? Prior to the improvements? For the waterfront ones again, the ones that would have waterfront views or would be over here. So I'm talking about Turnagain Heights Block K, lots 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, A, all of those are A's. Simonson Estates Block C, lot 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Those lots were in the upper 50s.
Upper 50s, okay. And then after the improvements, you show them jumping up to the 220s to the 230s, correct?
That's true, yes.
Okay. And if my math is right, 60 from 230 is about 170, correct?
Yes.
Now, if we look a little bit lower on the page, we're looking at the inland lots, if you will. Simonson Estates blocks, block B, lot 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And again, I'm looking primarily at these undeveloped lots at this time, 6, 7, 8, 9. Do you see those?
Yes.
And those generally go from 36,000 to 80,000, correct?
That's true, yeah.
With the one exception of Lot 9, which had a higher value prior to these improvements because it had the sewer access.
Yes.
Okay. So the value of those improvements for those lots was basically $44,000.
Yes.
And that's really, I mean, these lots, nothing really changed on them except for this road, water, and sewer were put in, right? I mean, there might have been market forces changing. They might have been going up because of market forces. I mean, we can see that, some of the other, for instance, Lot 10, went up slightly, and maybe that's market forces. But, in some of these improved ones, there might be market forces going on. But for the most part, I think you'd agree with me that this increase that you've identified here is related to these improvements.
Yes.
Okay. Now, between 2010 and 2011, you've jumped those lots up in value slightly more. There weren't more improvements that happened at that point, were there?
No.
You're not aware of any new or additional improvements?
No, I was not.
So that probably reflects market forces.
It can also reflect that as our land analysts are reviewing the area, as they're going through and determining, sometimes they make additional adjustments as they become more aware of how the value in the area is coming about. So it can be that they're adjusting the models, that if they made any mistakes, that they felt that, no, this should be better valued by a different method, they will apply those. So that also can play in effect.
Okay, and if we look at the 2012, from 2011 to 2012, again, focusing on these inland lots, the unimproved ones, they actually dropped back down. They went from 97 back down to 94, correct?
That's correct.
And if we look at 2013 and 2014, they haven't gone any higher than that, correct? Unless they were improved.
Yes.
And with regard to the land, when you assess it, if somebody does landscaping on their lot, then does it become worth more in the city's eyes, and therefore it's assessed at a higher value?
In our mass appraisal assessment, it's difficult for us to maintain a lot of various features that might have that type of effect when we're looking at a large segment, because we are not able to go and assure that all those features are there on every property every year. So we use a method of grade where we grade properties as to what's typical for that type of property. So, you know, the aesthetics of the improvement and what we would expect that property would have. And we pick it up that those properties in areas where there's big homes, there might be a larger land component.
Okay. Well, let me ask you this. I'm not sure if I understand, if you've answered my question. If I've got a lot and you've valued it at $85,000 or $90,000, it's got road, water, and sewer, but I haven't done anything with it. It's basically, you know, a raw land, wild. And then I landscape it. I cut down some of the scrub trees, plant some grass, plant some ornamental trees or bushes or flowers. Might I now have a higher assessment?
Within the municipality of Anchorage, we do not make those types of adjustments.
Okay. Okay, fair enough. So when I look then at Simonson Estates, Block B, Lot 7, I see that it went from $36,000 in 2009 to $80,000 in 2010, reflecting that $44,000 jump because of the improvements, correct?
That was the time period that we picked up the new road, and yes.
Okay. And then it jumped up to $97,000 in 2011. Then in 2012, that same lot jumped up to $114, and there's at least some structure on it at that point, correct?
Yes.
And then in
It might be a foundation of some kind that they're starting to construct.
Okay, and then in
home on the property.
And then in 2013, looks like they've probably completed a home on it because they now have improvements valued at $480. The lot value has gone up to $124. And then the next year, presumably because of market forces, the home value goes from $480 to $499, and the lot value goes up to $129, correct?
Yes.
So, and you can see that the lot right next door to it, Lot 6, which remained undeveloped that entire time, you know, does not see the land value go up similarly. So if you're not assessing the improvements to the land, why is it that these two lots next door to one another one, the land value has gone up substantially more than the other, even though they were the same originally. They were same before the improvement in 2009, and they were same immediately after the improvements in 2010, and they were the same in 2011. It was only after the improvements were built that the land value for the one started to go up.
I did not research this before this hearing, so I would have to research it to determine what was going on that particular piece of real estate.
Can you tell me what might be going on? I mean, again, you've got two lots. They look nearly identical in size on the map. And, you know, they're valued by your office at the exact same amount year by year until one starts to develop the improvements, and then suddenly the land value of that one goes up considerably more.
I would have to look at the particulars on the property to make a comment about why there's a difference between those two.
Can you even tell me what might it be?
At this point, I would be speculating, so
I'm not asking you to say what it is with regard to this property. I'm just trying to understand what it could be, because I can't even imagine what it could be unless you're taking into account landscaping. Or driveways. Does the driveway count to land value?
not typically, no.
So if it's not the driveway, it's not the improvements, because they're being assessed separately, it's not the landscaping, what is it that would make one lot that has improvements suddenly the land be worth much more than the lot next door when they were, before the one that built the improvements, the land was worth the exact same amount?
I'd have to research that to determine what the differences are.
But you can't even give me an example of what it could be, can you?
At this time, no.
Again, looking from 2009 to 2010, the best you can say in terms of what your office determined in terms of the value of those improvements is on the waterfront lots, there were some significant jump ups in value. You've got it at approximately $170,000, correct?
Which property are we talking about?
I'm talking about the waterfront lots, so Turnagain Heights, Block K, lots 1 through 6A, and Simonson Estates, Block C, Lot 8.
Well, at this time, those properties are not waterfront lots.
Well, I don't mean waterfront, but they're on the water side of the road.
Okay.
But you saw, you determined that those jumped up significantly in value, correct?
That's true, yes.
And you attribute that to the improvements
Yes, in the zoning.
and the zoning. And then with regard to these other lots, though, Simonson Estates, Block B, Lot 3 through Lot 9, the unimproved ones there, basically you saw them jump up in value, $44,000 for some of them, less than that for the one that had sewer prior to it, correct?
Yes.
So that's the value that the improvements added as best as your office could ascertain.
At that time, yes.
And with regard to lots 10 and 11, which were always improved going way back even into 2004, we looked at, those were the earlier ones that I showed you, lots 10 and 11, the improved ones. Those basically have always been assessed as though they had the road, water, and sewer because they had homes on them, correct?
Yes.
And so there isn't a significant difference as a result of these improvements in the value of those lots.
In regards to the assessment or to the benefits to those lots that a paved road would be in front of them now?
Well, I'm talking about fair market value, benefit in terms of fair market value.
Okay. In regards to the assessments, because they had access previously, the Lot 10 was had to build a temporary driveway across the right-of-way. They were able to use them, so there was some access to the property. So their difference changed little because of that in assessment.
Take a look at Exhibit I-3, and then if you'll also take a look at Exhibit I-8. So, first of all, I-3, the first page. First page of I-3. So generally speaking, sir, when you look at that, they've got a pretty nice setting there, a large expanse of lawn out in front of their home, correct?
Yeah.
And, I mean, it's it's an idyllic setting, isn't it? You'd agree with me? I mean, it looks pretty nice.
It looks like, a nice place to live, yes, I guess.
And then take a look at I-8. And this is the same home after the road went in. You can see the chimney on both of these pictures, and you can see the big tree next to the chimney, so it's a slightly different orientation.
Okay.
But you can see that this one, it had this expanse of lawn going out from the chimney and the tree this way, and after the improvements, it's basically cut off here at the road, correct?
Well, if we're looking at it and showing a picture that there was a lawn area out on the where the road was going to be, it wasn't theirs. They didn't own that.
I understand that. I understand that. But if you lived there, you'd kind of like that lawn, wouldn't you?
Sure.
I mean, so, and my point is this. I asked you a minute ago about the value of the improvements from an assessor's point of view, and you said basically there was no increase in value from these improvements from an assessor's point of view because they had road, water, access, sewer. They had a developed lot. So from an assessor's point of view, there wasn't much change, but you seem to think that there might be more of an esoteric benefit or personal benefit or intangible benefit that's not picked up by the assessor, right?
In this instance, there can be a variation. Prior to the road being put in, I can see that an owner would appreciate the fact that they had an open area in front of their property and it had an interim period that they'd have it. Also, on the other side, once the road has gone in and development begins down in the lower section along Marston, that also can add value to the property in the future. So future anticipation could be that now I've got a home that might be around an area where homes that are on a bluff are going to be built in higher values, which would have an effect that I might be able to sell my property more in the future, and so the time on the market could change.
Or conversely, having what was just a big open expanse with no homes going to a road with a bunch of now lots where you can have a bunch of homes around you could decrease their value too, right? That can happen as well.
Yes, but any knowledgeable buyer that had bought these properties would know that eventually that road was going to be there.
Well, I understand that, sir.
Yes.
But again, you're talking about trying to speculate about some future value because of additional homes being built. And what I'm saying is we don't know whether that's going to increase the value of this particular home or decrease it. I mean, if you've got a big open expanse with no homes around you, even if you don't own it all, that's a value. I mean, if you buy property next to Chugach State Park, you don't own Chugach State Park, but there's value associated with the fact that it's just a big expanse that you can look out on every day and every weekend drinking your coffee, correct?
Well, in that instance, though, that's you have a better aspect of believing that that will be there for you in the future.
Okay, but my point is, you're saying, well, we could speculate that maybe now that the road is here and a bunch of lots of are all next door to them that all can be developed and a bunch of homes put on, that might increase their value, but indeed it might decrease the value. It might have been much more valuable before those homes could be built than after, correct? Just like if you change, let me put it this way. Let's assume that they rezoned Chugach State Park and all of a sudden opened it up to a subdivision. You used to be right next door to a state park. Nobody was there. For whatever reason, times changed. We need the land. They rewrote it, and they opened it up to a subdivision. That could decrease the value of what you had, right? You might not have anticipated it, but it could decrease the value of what you had, right?
It could definitely change the value. Yes, it could.
No further questions.
Mr. Owens, did you have any follow-up questions?
Oh, I don't have any other questions. Thank you very much.
All right.
And if we can just take a brief recess, and I'll clean up my mess.
Sure. A quick question. Mr. Owens, we're approaching the 2:30 mark. What additional witnesses were you hoping to call this afternoon?
I have one more to speak to accounting accuracy.
Okay, so just one for you this afternoon. I think what we'll do is we'll take a brief, maybe 10-minute recess, and then I'd like to call Mr. Nuss back up to the stand just to address a couple questions I have, and then we'll go into your last witness.
Okay.
And then I think that'll finish us up for the day. Okay, so we'll be adjourned for 10 minutes. Are we all ready? Okay, it looks like everybody is back. So, Mr. Nuss, if you please will come on up, and you are still under oath.
Yes, ma'am.
So, I'm coming back to you because I think you can clarify some things for me here. When you had originally testified, and I might be commingling you with Mr. Brennan, so please correct me if I am, but you had originally, I believe, testified that because of the RID components had to be constructed when some of the Pump Station 10 lines were constructed, portions of the RID were included with Schedules A, B, and C. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Now, Mr. Brennan had indicated that if there hadn't been a known plan of residential development in this area, the drainage with those deep subterranean drains or subsurface drains, the drainage may have been different, and the plan for. Do you concur with that?
Yes, I concur with that.
Am I understanding this right in that if there was going to be no residential development in this area and Pump Station 10 were to be upgraded, there could have been a line run from Sandstrom Drive over in that general area? Is that right?
Yes, there's actually several different alternatives we could have chose, and I can review those on if you can allow me to put up the one diagram.
That would be helpful.
A8, I think, Bob.
A which?
Hold on. A7, please.
A7. You want to testify from here and use the Elmo? Does that help?
It doesn't. I just need that up real quick.
Okay, so we've got north
Push it up a little bit.
generally up.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah, right
is
there
that
should
right?
work.
that what you wanted?
Yes, sir. Thank you. So, Madam Chair, there was a couple different options that we could have done if we weren't considering development for the Marston Fork or Drive. And a lot of these are hypothetical because the reality is as early as 2004, we framed a lot of our decisions with the knowledge that Marston Forker was going forward. So knowing that Marston Forker was going forward, we framed our decisions and we made choices on alignments to accommodate that subdivision. But there could have been other things that we would have done. For instance, we could have made, if we had still chosen to construct Pump Station 10 here, we could have maintained this trunk line. We could have upgraded that, made it better. We could have lived with it how it was and just taken the maintenance hit on it, and then we would have only constructed this. If we had chose to still, if we had chose that we had not wanted to continue this trunk line in operation, most likely we would have just taken the trunk line and detoured it down Pete's Place here into the pump station. We probably wouldn't have selected an arrangement that went down Marston and then down through 2 lot lines where we had to acquire additional easement and right-of-way. We could have just gone through here. And so those would have been options that were available to us and we could have chose to do if we weren't thinking about the improvement district. As such, also, you heard testify and you also saw reference to letters written from VEI to me about the need for the subdrain. In the one letter from Vern Rolfs to myself, he said, the subdrain cutting across slope was important here, but not so important going through the lot lines. I believe that if we had gone down Pete's Place where it wasn't cutting through the subslope, we wouldn't have had to put the subdrain in there either. So those are things that would have changed had we not been taking Marston Forker into consideration.
Okay, that's helpful. Now, one other thing I just wanted a little clarity about was when you had testified, you had indicated the portion behind going from Sandstrom Drive over to where the pump station was, it wouldn't necessarily be preferable because there might be issues with long-term maintenance and availability to get to that line. Is that right?
So this line here, which was the existing trunk line, yes, there you can see how close the home is here to the line. Typically in easements where we have a sewer or a water line, we like a 30-foot wide easement for ease of access to be able to get in there, dig it, maintain it. I believe on this one the easement was only 20 feet wide. There was other utilities in the easement, making future maintenance difficult, not impossible, but difficult. So one of the things we considered was abandoning that line when we knew we were coming this way and we were going to construct it. Unfortunately, we weren't ever able to fully abandon that line because the actual service connections for, I forget if it was this house or this house, connect into that line, and so we would have had to completely reroute the service connection. So that line is still in service, just at a reduced capacity and only servicing a few homes, not all the flow coming from the remainder of the area.
Okay, so then it's fair to say from AWU's perspective, AWU does not actively try to expand their service area without the request of homeowners or residents or
without the request of homeowners, or there was grants that have been obtained in the past. Sand Lake, Northern Communities, those are areas where we have expanded our service area because of anticipated demand, shown need because of failing septic systems and things like that, and for which we've received grant money to help us expand that. But generally speaking, AWW does not go and build pipe to expand and gain customers.
And specific to this area, in the capital improvement projects list for AWW, this particular area has not been a project that's been on AWU's CIP list. Is that correct?
The only time that we put this area onto our CIP list was after passage of the ballot I don't remember if it was 2005 to 11 or 2006 to 12 capital improvement program list. We funded money in there for that. And we used to routinely include improvement districts dollars in the capital program in case that an improvement district came through, initially as a small amount, $100,000, $200,000 or something to begin design if an improvement district was approved, but the actual funding for construction would be in subsequent years' CIPs.
So it's fair to say because of the desire in the ballot proposition that passed, AWU changed their direction in the plans for this area as far as dealing with the stations, the pump stations, and they took the path to take a holistic approach. I would say. Is that accurate?
Yes. When we get into these situations, we try to think for the holistic look more than just a singular. We try to see the forest through the trees. We don't just look at the tree.
Okay, that's helpful. Now I'm going to change gears just a little bit because I think you gave a good description of it before, and I just need a little refresher here. But when we've had a lot of discussion as far as the bid that went out, what was allowed, what was not allowed. We've had the lid, the WID, the RID, the overall project cost. And if I could, let me find my page, turn it to Echo. Just had it. E2. E2. I think this is the third time I've come back to this one. So this is action on bids. You heard the purchasing officer earlier today indicate that he believes the bid was awarded within the spirit of what it was put out, the requirements of the bid. Can you give me one more time the basic understanding between basic bid and deductive alternative?
So the basic bid was schedules A, B, and C. The deductive alternate was D, E, F, and G, along with where should the improvements and the park project exceed available funding. The park project may or may not be awarded subject to availability funds. So that was Schedule G, that last item there on the first paragraph of 3.4. So the available funds, there keeps to be reference to the available funds that are shown on this bid abstract sheet. But that bid abstract sheet is not the whole compendium of funds available, and I think we tried to explain that at various times. When you go out to bid, you know how much cost has been spent to date. You have an estimate of what you believe the construction management may take. You have an estimate of what overhead and other AFUDC finance charges may be hit against the project. And so the available funding at the time of bid was more than just what was shown on that bid abstract. And a great way to kind of look at this is going back to N1 or N2. You can see that you have at the 35% estimate what was balloted. You have all these things like consultant design, engineering, public involvement, design, survey, plat, reconciliation, AWW design management, geotechnical engineering, administration, construction management and administration. And at the time of bid, between the WID and the LID, I don't know exactly the numbers for the RID, but for the WID and LID, it was about $170,000 had already been spent in those costs. Less than some of the costs associated that you see here on kind of these plug figures. And so based upon where we thought we were at with the engineer's estimate and things like that, we did plug in those numbers that you saw on the spreadsheet, that these kind of construction numbers, because this was easy to take these numbers out of these spreadsheets, put them onto the bid tab there, because it was something that we could back up and say, hey, conservatively, we should have this money available for Schedule D, E, and F, even with the components in there, and be able to award the job. And that's what the fund certification then says on the board memorandum as well, is that we certify those funds are available for the award and execution of the contract, just like you guys have anytime that an assembly memorandum comes forward. So that's just not the only funds available. There was other funds in reserve as well. And that's how, why I believe we did award in the spirit of this.
Okay, so then you would concur with the purchasing officer that, or let me put it this way, would you concur then with the purchasing officer in that this bid award was exactly in compliance with the proposed bid?
Yes, because at the time of the award, none of the deductible alternate exceeded the available funding. We had available funding to make the award.
Okay. And now I'm going to switch gears on you again a little bit and talk a little bit more in generalities regarding AWU. With specifics to pumps, the site in which Pump Station 10 sits, that was not included in the improvement district.
No, ma'am. At the time, and there'll be people that disagree with me in this room, but at the time that the ballot was done, and even at the time when I came on board in 2004, we believe that parcel to be parkland. That parcel was listed in CAMA as being MOA owned under the guise of HLB. It wasn't until I went to HLB and we started the research on that parcel that it became apparent that it may be owned by somebody else. And we went through a process to acquire that parcel. So at the time, that most likely was not included within the improvement district because it was viewed as parkland, far away from the road, and not subject to, we weren't looking to develop down Pete's Place to gain access to that parcel.
And within this improvement district, there are other parcels that are owned by the municipality.
Yes. So this pocket park here is owned by the municipality. Lynn Airy Park is also owned by the municipality, and I think one other parcel.
And these parcels that are owned by the municipality were assessed as part of these improvement districts.
Yes, ma'am.
So then, with that said, would it not be fair to ask, in retrospect, maybe Pump Station 10 site really should have been included?
In the initial ballot, Pump Station 10 wasn't within that area. Whether or not we could have gone back and modified the improvement district in 2007, you heard some reference earlier about Lot 3 and then also the pump station site. Whether or not we should have gone back in 2007 and modified the improvement district, I don't know the process or the legal ramifications of that. That may have had to go back through a whole nother series of ballots to then ask them participation, yes, no, all those kind of things. And whether or not that would have changed the dynamic, I have no idea.
Sure, but if we were just to look at this holistically, we would agree that Pump Station 10 site has benefited from this improvement district.
There is benefit in terms of access. There was some road construction did perform, so one could view it as such.
Okay. That's helpful. Those are all the questions that I have for you. I appreciate you coming back up. Are there any follow-up questions after my questions, Mr. Owens? Mr. Staley?
So, on this map, the old pump station is right there, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay, this is a house here, somebody owns this house, this is their lot, and basically you've got a pump station right on their lot, correct?
Yes, sir.
And they really weren't all that happy about that pump station being there, were they?
I believe that was Raj Raghav's house.
It was.
I don't think he minded so much as maybe his wife minded, was my understanding.
Okay.
He's an engineer. He gets it.
And this line going through here was not a 12-inch line, was it?
I don't recall. I believe that was an 8-inch line, yes.
Yeah, 8-inch line. And it was leaking, wasn't it? I mean, you had, in 2002, you had VEI hired them to find out how much infiltration you had coming into that, correct?
VEI performed an infiltration and inflow study for all of the Pump Station 10 service area.
Okay. Because it was believed that there was inflow and infiltration. What that means is that the pipe is leaking and that groundwater is coming in and overworking the pump station, because it's not just having to take care of sewage, now it's going to have to take care of groundwater coming in as well, right?
Yes, part of the belief at the time was that part of the capacity issues and why the pumps were having to run so much was that there was significant I&I going into the system. And so VEI performed a multi-year study looking at the area to try to determine sources of I&I.
Okay. And indeed, this pump station was running over capacity, and it was believed that at certain times of storms or heavy, runoff and things, that it might actually not being able to even keep up with it, and raw sewage was potentially being dumped into the inlet.
So there was a couple factors there. There was a significant amount of ragging issues, a lot of hair and grease balls that were coming into there that were causing two pump runs and ragging issues. And then also because of the significant pump runs without lack of emergency power on site there, if there had been a power outage and not sufficient storage. There was an old discharge that was constructed in the 70s that went, kind of followed Hood Creek out through the Durst and Spinelli properties there, and supposedly went out to the inlet, but we were never able to find the daylight, so we don't know if, in fact, anything ever discharged into the inlet.
Okay, but there was certainly concern about that going way back into the 90s.
There was concern, yes.
And so you knew that you had to do something with this pump station way back into the 90s.
97 is the first full report from CRW. Yes, sir.
Okay. And given the fact that this small pump station was on this person's lot, sometime prior to 2002, a decision had already been made that you needed to relocate that pump station, correct?
We looked at alternate locations to build the pump station to be able to fully accommodate what we typically desire with the pump station site. So,
Right.
yes.
So you were looking for a location, you were looking for an alternate location sometime prior to 2002 that would give you more space to build the pump station, more space to maintain it, come in, further away from homes and things so that you wouldn't be bothering Mrs. whatever her name, Pagava,
Yeah.
right? That's what you were looking for, right?
Ideally, yes, but we have in other instances where we can't find such a space, we have remodeled within the road. Lake Street out in Eagle River is an example. There's some other places around Campbell Lake and places like that where we haven't been able to find property, and we have then gone and done modifications within the road, put generators within buried structures and those kind of things. So those are always options that if we couldn't have found a different location, we could have done. Yes,
Sure, obviously. If you'd like to do X, but if you can't do X, you come up with Y. But you were looking for an alternative location, correct?
Yes.
And that's the preferable route, is to find an alternative location further away from homes, more room, and it also should be low in elevation, right?
Yes.
Okay. And indeed, this fit the bill, didn't it?
Yes.
And you said that you thought it was parkland. In fact, what really happened was that you thought that that was a remnant parcel owned by the heirs of Selma Smith, and you platted it and tried to buy it from the heirs, correct?
That was second. That was after we found out that it wasn't that, and we went through the title search property. So that was the second. Yes.
Okay. And that ended up in a lawsuit with the other people who own property in that area saying, the Muni is trying to buy this property from Selma Smith's heirs, and Selma Smith doesn't even own it. We own it, right? There was a whole lawsuit about that.
As I said, there would be people in this room that would disagree with my statement.
Yeah. And then that went on for a number of years, and that was decided in 2007, correct?
7 sounds about right.
Yeah. I'll represent you. The trial, I believe, was in January of 2007. And so
There was a subsequent appeal, and it wasn't resolved until later.
I'm not talking about when it was resolved. My point is, so you began looking at it before that lawsuit ever got filed because you at first thought it was parkland, and you were thinking about building it there when you thought it was parkland. Then, after subsequent investigation, you thought that it belonged to the heirs of Selma Smith. You had the area replatted and tried to buy it from the heirs of Selma Smith. I'm right so far, right?
Well, we didn't replat it.
Well, somebody drew a plat.
We never went to the platting board on it because of the clouded title, and so we proceeded with other things. There was conceptual drawings, but there was never a plat.
Okay, so then you made conceptual drawings. You tried to negotiate a sale. There was a lawsuit. Litigation went on for years, and all of that took place before the original litigation decision in 2007.
There was an expansive amount of time, yes.
So this was a long time ago that you began looking at, gosh, this would be a really good place for our new pump station.
August of 2004 was when I made the phone call to Bud Ingram. Yes, sir.
And so this had been looked at for a long time in terms of an ideal location. This line here was only 8 inches, which was not a big enough line for a trunk line to the pump station, correct?
That was not an ideal line, no, sir.
And it was really close to these houses, and so if you were having to put the new line in there, you'd have to use some sort of fancy technology where you don't actually even dig a trench, some kind of trenchless technology to try and put a new line in there. Right?
Most likely pilot tube microtunneling to keep it on grade. Yes, sir.
Okay. You really didn't have any involvement with the RID, did you?
Well, from 2004 to 2007, Brian Boss and I joint shared project engineering duties with regards to LID, WID, and the improvement districts, but our primary focus was on the LID, WID.
Right, okay. And that was 2004 to 2007.
Correct.
So whatever happened with regard to those after that, really the engineers on this was VEI, correct?
VEI was the design engineer. AWW made recommendations, provided guidance, oversight, concurrence, those kind of things, made sure that they were developing it in accordance with our standards, our desires. We were the client, and so we wanted it done our way.
Okay. And so VEI was the design engineer and also the construction engineer, weren't they?
No, the construction management was performed by MWH.
Okay.
We had VEI consultants hire an inspector to be out there to be our eyes and ears day to day on site. And then VEI provided construction assistance in terms of reviewing design changes, design submittals, and things like that. But they were not the mass engineer. The mass engineer was Jeff Coleman.
And you talked about, these engineers' estimates. I'm looking at M2 here. You talked about the fact that, in addition to construction funding, you've got funding, can't read that. You've got funding for consultant design engineer, public involvement, survey, geotechnical engineering, a variety of things, correct?
Yes, how we estimate the project, we put together the estimates at that level, yes.
And by the time you're putting this out to bid, most of that's been done. VEI's already designed it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Correct?
Yes,
And VEI has already done the geotechnical work, correct?
yes.
For the most part, the public involvement is done, correct?
For the most part, yes.
The surveying is done, correct?
Yes.
So most of that's done. What's left to be done is to construct this thing.
Construct it, management, and close it out. Yes, sir.
Okay. And so, like you said, somebody could say, well, gosh, how much money have we spent and how much money we have left? Or you could take a look at this and you could say, how much did we budget for construction, correct?
How much we estimated for construction.
Right. Right. And that's there's not much difference between budgeting and estimating, is there?
Sometimes, yes. But as you progress through the course of a project, your budgets can change.
And you didn't have involvement with the RID to the extent that you took any look and said, well, gosh, how much have we spent with VEI to design this thing, right?
At the time of award?
Yeah.
No, Jeff Coleman and in correlation with the folks from Public Works would have done that, yes.
So you can't say, gosh, we have X number of dollars left, can you?
I can't say today,
What was left at that time?
no, I can't say that.
And you haven't heard any witness come in here on behalf of the municipality and say, gosh, well, we took a look at it, and even though Prue's bid for the parts of the RID that we're going to have Prue's build comes in at 3.2, and our max funding number, our construction number is 2.7, that we really do have $500,000 extra.
Not to that exact word, but Russ Oswald did try to talk about that, about the plug being a conservative number. He did say that this morning.
Okay, but he didn't say, we looked at the numbers, how much we had spent, and this is how much we had left, correct?
Can I get a replay of what exactly he said? I don't believe he said in those exact words, but he did say we knew what we had available, and so we plugged that number being conservative.
Well, let's talk, sir. So what was left was to construct this thing and the construction management, correct?
Correct.
And Prue's bid for those two items came in roughly $500,000 over what had been identified by the design engineers as the estimated construction costs, correct?
At the time of the 35% design, but not at the time of the engineer's estimate submitted at the time of bid.
Yeah, nobody had opened that yet, right?
Well, yeah.
So we don't know what that says at that time, but for purposes of where that 2.7 came from, that came from VEI's estimate of what construction should cost, not just for Schedule D, but for Schedule D and Schedule B that was going to be built by the RID, correct?
The 2.7 came from the ballot estimates, yeah.
Okay. And so we know that Prue's bid for those two items was actually 3.2 or roughly $500,000 more, correct?
Yes.
And the only thing that was really left to be done was to have Prue's go out and build this thing, right?
Well, Bruce had to build it, we had to manage it through construction, we had to close out the project.
Okay. And we know that when you did that, it came in $500,000 roughly over the approved estimate, correct?
Are you talking the final project closeout costs? Yes.
And so Prue's bid was $500,000 over construction funding that was estimated by the engineer, and the final closeout was $500,000 over the approved estimate for the total project, correct?
In your perspective, yes, but you also have to look at the change orders and what other change orders occurred that may have gotten billed to the RID and things like that that weren't into consideration.
Well, let's take a look at that, because I think what we'll see is that Prue's actually constructed Schedule D for less than he bid. I mean, he actually was efficient, and it still came in $500,000 over. Do you have reason to disagree with me?
I did have to look at the final pay estimate. You may be right.
I'm showing you what's been marked as Exhibit 111.
Is he looking for the final pay estimate?
And you can see that for Schedule D, Prue's bid 2.371, and the total amount earned was 2.155, correct?
On that particular schedule, but then you have to go look at the change orders. You have to look at the change orders and what the change orders were.
Hang on one second. We just want to make sure we get you on the recording.
Okay, can you hear me now? Okay, so on that particular schedule, the final payment on that particular schedule, you are saying is 2.16740?
Yes.
And that was the previous earnings, total amount earned 2155381. We did an adjustment there on the final pay estimate. But you then also have to look at the rest of the change orders and see what the total value of the change orders associated with the RID add up to.
Exhibit E15, page 2.
Well, actually, I've got the exhibit here and I've got the podium, Bob. So I'm on the same exhibit, I think, but it's 111, so I don't have to redig it. 111, page 2. So first of all, Cruz bid 237 and he billed 215. So he built it for 220,000 less, Schedule D, minus whatever the change orders are. So now let's see if the change orders for Schedule D add up to more than 220,000. So we've got 111, page 2, and we see change order 1. Item D has $10,000, correct?
$10,863.54.
Okay. Change order 2, item D, 5,700. So now we're up to about 16,000, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Change order 3, item D, 48,000. So 16 and 48 is 64,000. The next change order 4, no Schedule D. Change order 5, Schedule D, 24. So 64 and 24 is now 88,000. Change order 6, no Schedule D. Change order 7, Schedule D, 35,000. So 84 and 35 is roughly 120. Change order 8, there's a Schedule B/D of 21. So now we might be up to 135, correct? And the final change order, Schedule D 14, so 150. About 150 for Schedule D, including that one that was Schedule DB, correct?
If you added it, I lost track of you. Go ahead.
Okay, I added up, and I think the panel can add it up. It's roughly 150. So if we add up the 150 for the change orders plus the 2155 that he got paid on Schedule D, you basically get 2.3, which is still slightly less than his bid.
He did a good job then.
So he did a good job. And so my point is this. When he bid, his bid came in $500,000 more than what probably was going to be there based upon the engineer's estimate, correct?
More than what?
We'd already spent the money on the design.
Which engineer's estimate are you referring to? Let's stop calling it engineer's estimate and call it DSR or ballot estimate, because the engineer's estimate represents, as Mr. Bernardini talked about today, the time at the engineer's estimate at the time of bid.
Okay,
So let's clarify that.
The engineer's estimate at the time of bid. I'm talking about the engineer's estimate that was used to give to the property owners and go before the assembly and get this project moving forward.
Okay, so the ballot estimate.
And the estimate for the construction cost, not just for Schedule D, but for Schedule D and the items from Schedule B that were going to be built by the RID was $2.7 million.
That is the estimate on that account, yes.
And so it was estimated that that was going to cost $2.7 million. And Cruz bid for those items $3.2 million, correct?
The analysis at the time of opening showed $3.2 million between those Schedule B and Schedule D items, correct?
Which is roughly $500,000 more than 2.7, correct?
More than the estimate at that time, yes.
And in terms of what Cruz actually built Schedule D for, he actually built it for less than what he had bid, correct?
Schedule D was built for less.
And notwithstanding that, the total bid still came in about $500,000 more, which is nearly identical to the $500,000 more than the max funding that was available.
That wasn't the max funding available. Okay, so are you talking about the estimate or the total project cost came in more than the max funding available?
I'm talking about the fact that 2.7 was identified as total construction costs for D plus B, correct? In the engineer's estimate that went before the assembly.
The 2.7 million was an estimate of construction in the balloted estimate.
That's right. That was the balloted estimate for Schedule D plus B. Correct?
That was the portion of that 4.413 million, and how the 4.413 million was developed included a $2.7 million estimate of value of construction.
Okay, and again, but it wasn't just construction of Schedule D, it was an estimate of construction of Schedule D plus those items of Schedule B that you expected to be paid for by the RID, correct?
Correct.
Okay, and so that was 2.7, and that 2.7 number is the same number that we see on the maximum funding for the bid abstract, correct?
For Schedule D, and Russ and I explained how that 2.7 got onto that piece of paper. Go ahead.
And Prew's bid for what was going to be built, according to that engineer's estimate that went before the assembly, that got balloted and everything, came in at 3.2, $500,000 more, correct?
$500 more than what was estimated, yes.
500,000, not 500, right?
$500,000,
correct?
okay.
He then built it, and he built it basically for what he bid it, correct?
I got to look at Schedule B too, but I believe so.
Okay. And indeed, then and all the money other than construction had mostly been spent already, other than construction and oversight of construction, right? And so when that all got done, we were still left $500,000 over, correct?
$500,000 more than the 4413?
Yeah.
Yes.
Total approved estimate, correct?
That was the
Total approved estimate.
voted balloted, yes.
Yeah. And we were $500,000 over that, correct?
4898 and change.
So, and you don't think that it's just coincidence that Prew's bid was $500,000 more than what was identified as the estimated construction costs, and the final ended up being $500,000 more than the estimated approved cost, do you? That's not just coincidence, is it?
I know that we would not have moved forward with awarding the contract if we thought that we were going to go significantly over. At the time of evaluation, we believed we could bring it in for the cost.
No further questions.
Thank you. Mr. Ness, I have one follow-up question, and it regards Pump Station 10. So when we were talking about the hypothetical, the plan if there was no residential development, and we started talking about Pump Station 10, the well there now is 40 feet deep. Is that correct?
The what?
The well?
You mean the wet well?
Yeah.
No, is how many feet deep did you say?
40?
No. That's one of the things that, Bob, can I borrow the plans?
Helpful.
I'm going to mess this thing all up before tonight. This is not the best view here, but I'll try to make it. So where that 40-foot number, Madam Chair, that you may have heard come from, is that in the geotechnical report prepared by Shannon Wilson back in 2005, they advanced borings to depths of 42 feet, because we weren't sure what depth we needed the wet well to make it to be able to sustain capacity for reserve capacity in case we have power outages and those kind of things. In generated facilities, we have to have 2 hours of storage capacity within the wet well to store what we anticipate to be the flow. In ungenerated facilities, 4 hours. So 40 feet was taken as a speculative amount. What ended up happening, and there's a whole separate memo, and I'd have to dig it back out, where we did analysis of different wet well configurations and those kind of things to decide what configuration we wanted the wet well to be. Where we ended up, each one of these lines here represents 5 feet in the vertical, so 5, 10, 15, 20, about 25 to 30 feet deep, not 40.
And one well or two is being asked.
One wet well.
So just a follow-up, and the reason it actually got shallower versus deeper is what?
We made a fatter wet well.
All right, thank you. Is there any follow-up question, Mr. Staley?
You need this out.
No. Mr. Nuss, I want to take a look at Exhibit 62. And Exhibit 62 is this September 2005 revised geotechnical report for Pump Station 10. We have that?
Yes, sir.
And if we look at page 4, so this is what Shannon and Wilson did, right? For Pump Station 10?
Yes, this is what Shannon Wilson prepared.
So if we look at page 4,
Native page 4 or exhibit page 4?
exhibit page 4, it talks about, from our conversations, we understand that a new sewer line is to be constructed connecting surrounding residences to a new proposed pump station to be located in the northern portion of the project area. The pump station itself will consist of a lightly loaded single-story building structure that will house the pump. The new facility may be served by new access roads depending on the final location of the building. A 40-foot deep wet well will be constructed on the north side of the new pump station. You have provided profile drawings of the proposed barrel depth of the sewer line after cutting, and we have adjusted our boring depths to reach this depth, I think is what it says.
This location for sampling.
This location for sampling. So even though it was ultimately changed, when Shannon and Wilson was asked to do its geotechnical analysis for the pump station, the information that they had was a 40-foot deep wet well.
Back in 2005 at this particular time.
And do you know, did anybody ever go back to Shannon and Wilson and say, oh gosh, we changed it, it's no longer 40 feet?
I don't know that.
Okay, thank you, no further questions.
And Madam Chair, their exhibit 59 is the discussion of the wet well analysis and everything that went into that.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Mr. Owens, did you have a follow-up?
No questions.
All right. Thank you. That'll do it. Mr. Owens, we have about 30 minutes. Will that be sufficient?
I'm certain it'll be sufficient for direct. I'm not sure about cross.
And can you remind me the name of the person in the topic?
Todd Lee.
And this is the auditor?
Yes.
Mr. Staley, do you anticipate, do you have any idea how much time your cross is going to take?
I don't think it'll take very long, but I don't know, I haven't talked to this witness, so I don't know what he's going to say.
Okay.
I think we could adjourn for the day, frankly, and we'd still be fine tomorrow. I mean, I'm not anticipating any problem with getting done.
Okay, let me defer to the committee members. Do you want to either potentially go late today, or do you want to hold this witness over till tomorrow? Are you fine with that? Whatever Mr. Trainee says. Okay, so we will go ahead and adjourn for today. We will start tomorrow with Mr. Lee first, and then hopefully we can conclude. Now, just as a reminder, if needed, we can go as late as 7 p.m. tomorrow night. Okay? All right. We are adjourned for today. Thank you.